Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is August 31st. On this day in 1985, the terror that had gripped Southern California finally came to an end. But it didn't happen in a dramatic police raid or a carefully staged ambush. Instead, it happened in the streets of East Los Angeles, where everyday residents recognized the man on the front page of the morning paper, chased him down, and refused to let him escape. Today, we're discussing the capture of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and the mob that almost killed him. Let's get started. The summer of 1985 in Southern California was suffocating, and not just because of the heat. For over a year, the man newspapers had dubbed the Night Stalker had been creeping into homes in the dead of night, leaving behind scenes of horror. Richard Ramirez's crimes were brutal and terrifyingly unpredictable. He broke into houses through unlocked doors and open windows. He killed men and women, attacked children and the elderly, robbed homes, and committed unspeakable assaults. His victims were scattered across suburbs like Monterey Park, Monrovia, Arcadia, and Whittier. Detectives, many of them hardened veterans, were stunned by the sheer savagery of the crimes. The randomness made him impossible to predict and very difficult to catch. And so an entire region lived on edge. Parents began double locking doors, families nailed windows shut despite the sweltering heat, and neighborhoods formed watch patrols. One historian later called it Satan's Summer in the City of Angels. But on August 24th, police finally caught a break. After a violent attack in Mission Viejo, they recovered a partial license plate from a stolen Toyota station wagon. Technicians used a cutting-edge forensics tool, an argon ion laser, to lift prints from the car. Over 14 tense hours, they scanned and processed them until a match came back from the Sacramento database: Richard Ramirez. With that, the Phantom had a name. And the next morning, his face was plastered on newspapers across California. Unaware that his face was now everywhere, Ramirez returned to Los Angeles on a bus from Tucson, Arizona. He stepped off into East LA, walked into a liquor store, and saw himself staring back from the front page of La Opinión. The headline read, "Invasor Nocturno." Panic flashed across his face. He bolted from the store, but the damage was done. People recognized him. Word rippled through the neighborhood. The Night Stalker is here. Richard Ramirez tried to run. He tried stealing a car, but East LA was done living in fear. This time, the community chased back. The chase came to a head on East Hubbard Street, a quiet working-class block that would suddenly become the stage for the end of the Night Stalker's reign. Ramirez lunged into a red Ford Mustang, attempting a carjacking, but the car's owner, Faustino Tino Piñon, was having none of it. He grabbed Ramirez, dragged him out of the vehicle, and shoved him into the street. Ramirez scrambled across the road and yanked a woman, Angelina de la Torre, out of her car, hitting her as she screamed. Her husband, Manuel, reacted immediately. He tore a steel rod from a fence and smashed it across Ramirez's head. The commotion drew in more neighbors. Retired construction worker Jose Burgoyne dropped the garden hose that he had been holding and sprinted into the fray, with his sons Jaime and Julio right behind him. Together, they chased Ramirez down the block and tackled him to the ground in front of 3732 East Hubbard. A teenage girl, Tina Piñon, later remembered seeing Ramirez slumped on the curb, bloodied and dazed, while her neighbor held the steel rod inches from his face. Ramirez reportedly muttered, "Thank God you came," when officers finally arrived. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For over a year, Ramirez had inspired paralyzing fear. But in the end, it was a group of neighbors armed only with outrage, courage, and a steel rod who brought him down. By 9 a.m., the police had Ramirez in custody. For the city of Los Angeles, the relief was immediate. News spread across radios and televisions. The Night Stalker has been caught. Officials praised the bravery of East LA residents who refused to be victims. One Los Angeles Times editorial captured the mood perfectly, saying, "My hat is off today to the citizens of East Los Angeles." On that ordinary Saturday morning, a neighborhood had done what an entire state's worth of investigators had been struggling to do. They ended the horror. Ramirez's capture became more than just a law enforcement victory. For East Los Angeles, a predominantly Latino neighborhood too often overlooked or stereotyped, it became a point of pride. People still remember that day, and even decades later, locals will gesture toward the Burgoyne home and say, "That's where they caught him. My neighbors caught him." For Los Angeles as a whole, the arrest was cathartic. It marked the end of a season of fear that had been so pervasive that people still call it Satan's Summer, even decades later. Ramirez, of course, went on to face trial and would eventually be convicted of 13 murders and sentenced to death. But for many, the true story wasn't just in the courtroom. It was on East Hubbard Street, where ordinary people decided that enough was enough, and they took back their neighborhood and their city. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!